Oh, hi guys! Have you heard about Apple M1 chip? Well, in this video, we are going to talk about the Apple M1 chips and why they did use their own chip instead of Intel processor, and what are the advantage of M1 chips to Intel processor. So, let's find out. Apple released the first Mac with an ARM-based M1 chip last year, debuting new 13-inch MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, and Mac Mini 2020 models. This year, Apple added the M1 chips on the iMac and iPad Pro. Now, what is Apple M1 chip? It's an ARM-based system on a chip designed by Apple. It was inspired by their Apple A14 Bionic chip, which was used in their 4th generation iPad Air, as well as the iPhone 12 series. The Apple M1 chips have a 3.2 GHz of speed. It comes with 8-core CPU, up to 8-core GPU, unified memory architecture, secure image signal processor, 16-core neural engine, USB 4 controller, and a 5nm with 16 billion transistor that brings up to 3.5 times faster CPU performance and up to 6 times faster GPU performance and up to 15 times faster machine learning capabilities compared to the Intel chips used in prior generation machines. Apple chips are based on ARM technology, as opposed to the x86 architecture that Intel's chips use. ARM was originally designed for mobile devices, and chips built with ARM designs are consistently more efficient. Apple CEO Tim Cook has frequently said that the company has a long-term strategy of owning and controlling the primary technologies behind the product they make. We can say that Apple has preceded Intel in innovating because Apple has already made 5nm chips, while Intel is stuck with 10nm chips. If you watch our previous content about Intel processor, we can say that Intel is having a hard time producing new chips since their 11th generation processor are based on 10nm Ice Lake CPU core that has been backported for 14nm and redesigned to fit the characteristic of Intel's 14nm process. In chip design, NM refers to the length of transistor gate. The smaller the gate, the more processing power that can be packed in a given space. The new Apple MacBook Air with M1 chip still have the same iconic wedge aesthetic, but the Apple Silicon mix is far more powerful and capable than ever before when it comes to CPU performance. M1 beats out even the highest chips used in Intel Apple's lineup. The M1 chip has the fastest single-core performance of any Mac, and the multi-core performance isn't too far off from many of Apple's desktop machines. Now, let's compare the performance, battery life, and thermal system of a MacBook Air M1 and the MacBook Air Intel. With Geekbench 5 benchmark, the MacBook Air M1 scored 1,717 on a single core, and on multi-core, it scored around 6,650, while the MacBook Air Intel scored 1,138 on a single core and a 2,548 on a multi-core. Even with incredible speed improvement that the M1 chip brings, it's also more battery efficient than any other MacBook has released. What's the use of having a high-performance laptop if the battery life is quickly run out? Well, the Apple said that the entry level of MacBook Air can manage 15 hours of web browsing in one charge, nearly 30% more than 10 to 11 hour battery life of the previous Intel-based model. Thermal throttling can have a big impact on performance. With a high performance or specs of a laptop, it surely generates a high temperature. Exhaust fan has a big role to lessen the heat during the workload and to avoid thermal throttling. But what's more interesting on a MacBook Air M1 is it doesn't have a fan. Even if it doesn't have a fan, it shows that MacBook Air M1 has a better thermal system than a MacBook Air Intel. The M1 has lower heat comparing with the Intel, knowing that the M1 doesn't have a fan to dissipate heat. Even if we don't say, the pros of MacBook Air M1 is very visible. It is much faster, less power consumption, and great battery life to compare with previous generation of MacBooks. But it doesn't mean that it's perfect. There are some downsides that might be worthy of your consideration. The new MacBook with M1 chips has 2 Thunderbolt Type-C port only and 1 audio jack. You will need a USB hub to use for your other devices. You can drive a couple of monitors from the M1 Mac Mini. But the M1 MacBook Pro and MacBook Air will only allow one monitor to be connected. Not all Intel apps may work using Rosetta 2. In most cases, you won't notice any difference in the performance of an app that needs Rosetta, but you should contact the app developer to inquire about a version that can natively use the full power of performance of Apple Silicon. Since the M1 are known as a system on a chip where all the main components are soldered to the motherboard, making even professional upgrades seemingly impossible. If you worry that buying a new ARM-based Mac will mean none of all apps are supported, it's understandable concern. But you should be fine. There's a reason Apple isn't switching immediately to its own processor and cutting off Intel support all at once. Besides the fact that older Macs still being used for years to come, developers will need to update their existing apps to work for the new processor. Fortunately, Apple seems more prepared this time than when they switched to Intel. But the very first Macs using ARM-based processor might still be waiting for some of the benefits. As of now, M1 chip is the most powerful Apple processor on the market. Do you think Intel will improve for the next few years? Hope you like this video, and for more contents, please like and share and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell so you will be updated. Again, I'm Wilfred of OPENPINOY at your service. See ya!